My name is Alex. I am 34 years old, and I want to share my story with you. The email came through while I was stationed in the heat-blasted emptiness of the Middle East, halfway through my 5th deployment. 13 years of marriage undone by a subject line that read, "Let's handle this like adults." No greeting, no apology. Just 3 lines. She had already filed the divorce papers, she had already emptied our joint savings, and she had already moved someone named Eric into our house. She ended it with, "I hope you understand." I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen until the desert wind outside started rattling the corrugated metal of our communications shack. When I finally responded, it was with a single word. Understood. I didn't feel much. Not yet. Just numb. I closed my laptop, washed the dust off in the communal shower, and pulled on a clean uniform. That night, back in the barracks, I said nothing to anyone. A few of the guys noticed I was quieter than usual, but no one asked. Out here, silence often means survival. I had sensed this unraveling for months before I deployed. Becky had grown cold, detached. She stopped asking about my day, started staying late at work, admin job at a dental office, and somehow always seemed too busy or too tired. She'd joined a gym, though I never saw the results. New clothes, new friends she never introduced me to, and her phone was suddenly off limits. Still, I didn't confront her. That's not who I am. But I'm not stupid either. I started preparing long before the email came. I moved all critical documents, birth certificates, the house deed, in my name, courtesy of the VA loan, even my grandfather's old watch, into a rented storage unit across town. Quietly, I opened a new account at a different bank, diverting a portion of each paycheck there. Not a lot. Just enough to ensure I wouldn't be left with nothing if the ground gave way beneath me. She didn't know that part. She also didn't know I had full remote access to our home security system, or that I had a second account with the bank where the real savings sat untouched. What she got was the visible money, the account we used for groceries and bills. The decoy. Even so, I couldn't shake the hollow ache in my chest when I saw the name Eric in her email. Just like that, she'd brought a stranger into our home. My home. The house I'd renovated myself on my last leave. I could picture him sitting at my kitchen table, using my coffee mug, maybe walking my dog. It was surreal, like watching your own life from the outside. We met in 2010 at a 4th of July cookout. I was staying with my buddy in Spokane between deployments. Becky was studying nursing back then. She never finished. Said working reception at the dental clinic was less stressful. We were married 8 months later. Fast maybe, but it felt right at the time. She used to say she was proud of my service, though I don't think she ever really understood it. Her father was a tax consultant, her brother a pharmacist, no military history. She'd ask, "When will you get a real job?" as if I was just playing soldier. But the army was my job, my career, my structure in a chaotic world. The house we bought in 2014 wasn't much. 3 bedrooms, quiet street, but it was mine. She wasn't on the mortgage, since the VA loan was in my name, but I added her to the deed. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You share. My parents died a few years apart, dad from a heart attack, mom from cancer. They left me just enough to pay off our student loans and put something aside. That money built the life we had. Now, she'd torn it all down in 3 sentences. The night before I left for this deployment, she hugged me at the airport like she was saying goodbye to a neighbor, not a husband going to war. I should have known then. But hope has a way of blinding you, even when the truth is right there. When the first wave of shock wore off, something colder took its place. Not rage, not sorrow, something clearer, focus, discipline. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to beg, I was going to think, plan, and act. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mission now. By the time my boots hit American soil again, 6 months had passed. I returned leaner, quieter, and with eyes that had seen more dust and fire than any man should. There was no welcome party, no one waiting at the gate. I didn't expect one. My old truck was still parked where I left it, at my friend Jason's place just outside base. I slid behind the wheel and drove west through empty stretches of road, the sun setting like a blood smear across the horizon. My phone buzzed a few times on the way, messages from a few guys on base, a lawyer I'd contacted from overseas, and one unknown number I didn't bother to open. I had no interest in Becky's apologies, if that's what they were. The first stop was the storage unit. Everything was still in place. Documents, keepsakes, a few photos my parents left behind. I sat on the cold concrete floor for a long time, letting the silence do what words never could. No one could take this from me, not her, not Eric, not anyone. I didn't go to the house right away. I booked a room at a roadside motel an hour out of town, the kind with faded carpets and vending machines that only take quarters. I needed time to think, to plan the next step. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming control. She hadn't responded to my last message. Understood. I didn't send anything else. What could I possibly say that wouldn't cheapen everything? I wasn't going to grovel, and I wasn't going to fight for someone who'd already replaced me. But I would finish this on my terms. The lawyer I'd retained was efficient. I'd laid the groundwork months ago when I first suspected something was wrong. A no-nonsense guy with a military discount and a spine like steel. He had already filed a countersuit citing financial misconduct and abandonment. Turns out, withdrawing all the money from a joint account without notice while your spouse is deployed counts for something in court, especially when that spouse is in a war zone. But that wasn't the victory I was after. I wanted peace, clarity, and above all, closure. 3 days after I got back, I drove to the house. It was still technically mine. The title had never changed. I had paid every mortgage installment while deployed. She hadn't contested the deed transfer, probably thought she'd get it all in the divorce. She was wrong. I parked half a block away and watched. There was a silver Honda in the driveway I didn't recognize. The grass was overgrown. My dog, Scout, was gone. That hurt more than I expected. I had rescued him from a roadside in Kandahar and brought him home 2 years later. Becky always said he barked too much. I guess she didn't like reminders of where I came from. I didn't knock. I didn't even get out of the truck. I just stared at the house I built. The porch light flicked on as dusk settled. I saw silhouettes behind the blinds, 2 people moving like strangers in a borrowed life. She had changed the locks. That was fine. I had already taken pictures for my lawyer. The overgrown yard, the car I didn't know, evidence of cohabitation. I left without a word. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a rhythm. I got an apartment near the river. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. I started running again. Early mornings, long stretches along the water. It helped clear my head, helped me process the mess. Word got around town eventually. Small towns don't keep secrets for long. Her name started showing up in conversations I overheard at the gas station, the diner, even the barber shop. Eric, it turned out, was recently divorced himself. Known for bouncing between jobs, a local barfly with a flashy smile and empty pockets. She didn't see it coming. The court sided with me. The bank records, the lawyer's prep, the photos, it all added up. She had no legal claim to the house, and her attempt to liquidate the joint account without consent during a deployment? A big mistake. I got the house. I didn't want it anymore, but I got it. She and Eric moved out 2 weeks after the ruling. I never saw them leave. One day, they were there. The next, the place was empty. I went back once, stood in the living room, looked at the patches where our wedding photos used to hang. I didn't feel anything, just a hollow sort of relief. I put the house on the market the next day. Selling the house took less time than I expected. A retired couple from Denver bought it at asking price. No negotiations, no drama, just a clean transaction. I signed the final documents at a quiet title office and walked out with a check that almost made the years of sacrifice feel worth it. Almost. I deposited the money and didn't touch it. I wasn't looking to spend or celebrate. I was looking to rebuild. On my terms, with my rules, and in absolute silence. I took a job working logistics at a nearby veterans nonprofit. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt good, honest. The team was small, tight-knit. Everyone knew what it meant to carry scars you couldn't explain. We didn't talk about the war unless we had to. Most of the time, we just got things done. Supplies, food, emergency funds, counseling referrals. Quiet wins. I liked it that way. The apartment became a kind of sanctuary. No shared drawers, no toothbrush next to mine, no one to explain myself to. I kept a rigid routine. Up by 5, run by 5:30, work by 7, home by 6, cook, read, sleep, repeat. It was monotonous, but it gave me control. A kind of control I'd lost in the last year of chaos. Becky didn't reach out, not after the court ruling, not after I sold the house. I figured maybe she'd moved on with Eric, or maybe he moved on without her. Either way, it wasn't my business anymore. That chapter had closed, and yet there were moments, small, uninvited moments, when her face would flash across my mind. A birthday, a certain song, the smell of coconut from someone's shampoo at work, ghosts in the form of memories. They never stayed long. I stopped letting them. The nonprofit grew. I got promoted to program director and started speaking at local events, mostly low-key, mostly quiet. One afternoon, after giving a talk at a community center about the challenges returning vets face, a woman approached me in the parking lot. Early 40s, soft-spoken, wore glasses too big for her face. Her husband had taken his own life after coming home. She just wanted to say thanks. That maybe hearing my story, what little I shared, helped her understand her own grief better. That night, I sat in my truck for over an hour before driving home. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. But something shifted. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was helping, maybe even healing. One morning, almost a year after I got back, I ran into Jason at a farmer's market. He had been one of the few people who kept in touch while I was deployed, one of the few who never took Becky's side or offered hollow sympathies. We caught up over coffee. He told me that Eric had moved 2 states away, chasing a new job or new woman. No one really knew. Becky had been seen working at a dental office part-time. Word was, she was living alone in a rental near the highway. She didn't come around much. People stopped asking. I didn't feel anything. Not satisfaction, not bitterness, just a quiet, numb sort of acceptance. Jason looked at me for a moment too long and finally asked what everyone probably wanted to ask. How'd you not go after her, after all that? I didn't answer right away, but eventually I just said, because it wasn't about her anymore. And that was the truth. She made her choices. I made mine. She took shortcuts. I took the long road. And while she was chasing temporary happiness in someone else's arms, I was building something solid, even if no one else could see it. There were still hard days, nights I woke up in sweat from dreams I couldn't remember, days when I flinched at loud noises. But I kept going, kept building, kept running. The past wasn't a prison anymore. It was a foundation. Eventually, I adopted a new dog, a rescue, like Scout had been. She was quiet, cautious, scar on one ear. I named her Delta. She slept curled at my feet every night, never straying too far. People started inviting me to things again, barbecues, fundraisers, even a blind date set up by one of the counselors at work. I went once. She was nice, a bit too chatty. We didn't go out again, but it didn't feel like a failure. It just felt like progress. I wasn't the same man who left for deployment. I wasn't the broken one who returned either. I was someone new. Not whole, maybe, but real. And that counted for something. It had been 2 years since the divorce when the letter came. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, with a return address and her handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for hours before opening it. I didn't recognize the address. Somewhere in Oklahoma. The letter wasn't long. 3 pages. Neat. Careful. Almost too careful. She said she didn't expect me to respond. She wasn't writing to reopen anything. She just wanted to say a few things. Things that she'd carried, apparently, and needed to let go of. She wrote that life didn't turn out the way she thought it would. Eric had left her 6 months after I returned, told her he wasn't ready to play house with someone who still had boxes in the garage labeled joint stuff. His words, not hers. She'd struggled, job to job, moved twice, tried dating, failed, said she wasn't writing to make me feel bad or to make excuses, but admitted that she had made some ugly, impulsive choices. That was the phrase that stuck. Ugly, impulsive choices. She didn't say sorry directly, just circled around it like a dog testing the perimeter of a yard. She mentioned the house, how strange it was to look up property records and see my name as seller and a new couple living there. She wondered if I kept any of our wedding photos. Said she didn't. Claimed it wasn't out of spite, but because seeing them made her feel like she'd stolen something sacred and ruined it. She ended the letter by saying she hoped I'd found peace, whatever that looked like. I folded the pages and put them in a drawer. Never wrote back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't have anything left to say. That letter, strange as it sounds, gave me closure more than anything else. Not because it explained her or justified anything, but because it made one thing absolutely clear. She was still stuck. I was not. The nonprofit had grown significantly. We launched a mentorship program for younger vets, and I became a kind of unofficial guide for those just coming out of service. I didn't see myself as wise or particularly inspiring. I just knew what it felt like to come home and have no idea what home even meant anymore. I started traveling for work, Texas, North Carolina, even D.C., to meet with representatives pushing for expanded mental health services for veterans. I wasn't just a guy in recovery anymore. I was part of something that mattered. During one trip to Colorado Springs, I met someone. Her name was Maya. She worked in disaster response logistics, which meant she spoke my language. She had a calm demeanor and a laugh that didn't feel forced. We talked over coffee at a conference, then again at dinner, then again through texts for a month straight before either of us admitted we were interested. She didn't know my whole story at first, just the outlines. When I told her more, she didn't flinch, just listened. That was enough. Maya didn't try to fix me. She didn't treat me like a project or a redemption arc. We took it slow, intentionally. I didn't bring her to my apartment for a long time. When I finally did, she noticed the drawer where Becky's letter was kept but didn't ask. A few weeks later, I took it out, reread it, and quietly shredded it. Maya smiled when I told her. I didn't need Becky's words anymore. With Maya, things were different, balanced. I wasn't walking on emotional eggshells, and she didn't try to drag my past into every conversation. We spent weekends hiking with Delta, cooking, laughing at terrible movies. Nothing dramatic, nothing volatile. One Sunday morning, I realized I hadn't thought about the divorce in months. Not consciously, not with any weight. It was just something that had happened to a version of me I no longer recognized. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't chasing some idea of success to spite Becky or Eric or anyone else. I was simply living, fully, honestly, and for the first time in a long time, freely. The final piece fell into place when I stood in front of a crowd at a veterans gala and received a small glass award for community impact. It wasn't flashy, but it meant something. I glanced at Maya in the front row, smiling up at me. I realized right then that every loss I'd endured had somehow carved out space for this moment. For her, for peace, For the life I was now choosing every day, not by accident or desperation, but with purpose. Spring had just started to bloom when I got the invitation. It was a high school reunion, not mine, but Becky's. A mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me on social media to ask if I'd be attending. Apparently, she'd mentioned my name when the topic of old flames came up during the planning committee. She said she wouldn't mind seeing you again. The message ended with, as if that detail was meant to entice me. I stared at it for a while before closing the app. I didn't reply. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I didn't need to see her. I didn't need to revisit those memories. Whatever emotional tether had once connected us was long severed, and not with a dramatic snap, but with a quiet, intentional release. I had my life now, a life that didn't orbit around resentment or regret. Maya and I had just signed a lease on a new place, a little craftsman-style home tucked in the outskirts of town, with a fenced yard for Delta and an extra room we were calling the Maybe Someday Nursery. We hadn't made any declarations yet, no proposals or timelines, but we both knew we were building something real, something stable, something earned. The nonprofit had grown into a network of 5 regional offices, and I'd been asked to sit on the board of a national veteran support initiative. I wasn't just helping others find direction anymore. I was shaping the conversation about what reintegration could look like for the next generation. Every once in a while, someone would bring up the past, an old friend, a former colleague. "Whatever happened with that girl you were married to?" they'd ask casually. And I'd just say, "She's part of the story, not the ending." It was true. She wasn't the villain of my life, not anymore, just someone who made a selfish decision that set a chain of events in motion. It hurt, deeply. But pain doesn't have to be permanent. Sometimes it's the pressure that reshapes you into someone stronger. A few months after the reunion invitation, I ran into someone who had attended. They told me Becky had shown up alone, looked different, tired maybe, not sad, but not the shining center of attention she used to be. She worked at a local marketing agency, still moved around a lot, hadn't remarried. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no vindication, just distance. It was a sign I'd finally arrived at the place I'd been walking toward all along. Indifference. Not coldness, not cruelty. Just peace. The kind that doesn't require any audience. The kind that lets you breathe without checking over your shoulder. One evening, Maya and I sat on the back porch, watching Delta chase a squirrel up the fence. She leaned her head on my shoulder and asked, out of nowhere, "If you could go back and undo what happened with her, would you?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to give the moment the respect it deserved. Finally, I said, "No. I wouldn't change it. If she hadn't done what she did, I might still be sleepwalking through life, still in a job I didn't love, still in a marriage that looked good on paper but felt hollow. I wouldn't have found this. You." She squeezed my hand, and that was it. No dramatic music, no swelling emotion, just 2 people sitting with the quiet power of truth. It's strange how sometimes the worst thing that ever happened to you becomes the doorway to the best things. I used to think healing looked like a full bank account or a new partner who made my ex jealous. I thought it was about winning. But healing, I've learned, is about choosing your future without needing to avenge your past. It's about building, not proving. And in that sense, I've already won. Not because I got richer, or stronger, or happier, but because I no longer carry her betrayal like a burden. I carry it like a stepping stone, a reminder of who I was and how far I've come.